Before we begin, if you love stories where humanity stares down the impossible and wins, where grit and loyalty matter more than fleets or firepower, then smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next chapter of this saga. Now let's get into it. The sky above Caravel Prime's northern wastes was the color of blood left too long in the sun, a haze of dust and storm lightning rolling over jagged plains. Captain Rin Calder squatted beside the half-buried skeleton of a mining crawler, prying loose a scorched mineral core from its cracked housing. It was hot in his palm, fresh enough to fetch a high price, if he made it back alive. The wind shifted. He froze. A low tremor ran through the ground, faint at first, then steady, measured, predatory. The hair on the back of his neck prickled. He'd heard that rhythm once before on a mission years ago, and they'd lost 9 men in less than a minute. He tapped his comm static hissed, then a clipped voice broke through. Calder. You're in Zone 3? Yeah, he muttered, scanning the horizon. You see it, you run. No one survives the stormfang. The channel cut before he could answer. He stuffed the core into his pack, eyes never leaving the dust-choked horizon. Lightning flashed, and for an instant he thought he saw a silhouette, massive shoulders, a low crown of spines, eyes burning like molten gold. Then the dust swallowed it again. He turned back toward his shuttle. The storm was pushing in faster than predicted, a wall of roiling grit that could strip skin from bone. His boots crunched over fractured glass planes, each step pulling him further from the shelter of the wreck. The ground shook again, closer. Rin broke into a jog, glancing back. A shape moved in the dust, easily 4 meters at the shoulder, all muscle and armor-plated hide. Its head swung like a serpent's, scanning. The stories called it the galaxy's deadliest predator, but the term animal never quite fit. There was too much calculation in those movements. Too much choice. A new sound cut through the wind, metal groaning. He crested a ridge and stopped dead. Below, the stormfang lay half-pinned beneath the twisted wreckage of a syndicate gunship. The massive vessel had gouged a crater into the salt flats when it fell, and jagged beams had speared through the predator's flank. Blood, black and steaming, pooled beneath it. Around the wreck were the shredded remains of mercenaries, torn armor, twisted limbs, weapons bent like scrap wire. It saw him instantly. The head lifted, jaws opening in a guttural roar that rattled his bones. Its foreclaws scraped furrows in the ground as it tried to lunge, but the debris held it fast. Even crippled, it could probably kill him if he got too close. Rin's first instinct was to back away, slow and careful. Let the storm finish it. Let the galaxy's worst nightmare bleed out in the dirt. Safer for everyone. But he didn't move. Not yet. A memory rose unbidden, himself trapped under rubble on a nameless battlefield, hearing the boots of his unit retreating, leaving him for dead. The way the air had tasted of dust and metal. The certainty that no one was coming back. He swore under his breath. From his pack he pulled a plasma cutter and a spare charge. The predator's gaze tracked every motion, pupils narrowing, nostrils flaring at his scent. He spoke aloud, voice steady. Easy, big guy. Just gonna move this off you. It bared its teeth, a deep, resonant growl shaking the air. Rin stepped closer. Heat radiated from its body, the copper tang of blood sharp in his nostrils. The first cut sent a shower of sparks into the dust, lighting the predator's eyes in a way that felt uncomfortably intelligent. The beam gave way with a crack. The stormfang twisted, hissing in pain but didn't strike. Another beam, cut, levered aside. On the third, it shifted enough to wrench itself free, muscles rippling, claws gouging the salt. For a moment they stood facing each other, man and beast, both breathing hard, the storm snarling around them. Then it turned. Limped away, slow but steady, vanishing into the dust like a phantom. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You're welcome, he muttered to the empty air. The storm hit in full force minutes later. Sand and grit stung his face, the wind keening like a living thing. He barely made it back to the shuttle, only to find the left stabilizer half buried and the fuel line shredded. Without a miracle, he wasn't leaving this wasteland tonight. He rigged a makeshift camp in the lee of the shuttle's hull, heat lamps casting a dim glow. The wind howled, shaking the plating. Every sound beyond the storm set his nerves on edge. Hours passed. He sat with his back to the hull, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the darkness. A shadow moved at the edge of the light. Rin's grip tightened on the rifle. The shape was too low for a man, too broad for a drifter scavenger mount. The wind shifted and the scent hit him, sharp, metallic and unmistakable. The stormfang stepped into view. Up close, its presence was suffocating. Armor plates ridged its back, each one scored with old battle scars. The wound along its flank oozed, but it stood steady, golden eyes fixed on him. It circled once, slow, deliberate. Then it stopped, between him and the open desert, and lay down. Not facing away as if ignoring him. Facing outward. Guarding. Rin sat frozen, the storm's howl fading into a strange, tense silence between them. He didn't understand it. Didn't dare speak. But deep down, in the part of himself that still believed in debts and in loyalty earned the hard way, he knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By morning, the storm had thinned into a low haze, sunlight bleeding weakly through the dust. Rin woke to the sound of heavy breathing close enough to feel on his skin. Kareth, though he didn't yet call it that, was sitting not 10 feet away, shoulders hunched, muzzle lowered to sniff at the mineral core he'd pried from the crawler. The predator's eyes flicked up when Rin stirred, golden irises narrowing. Then, with deliberate slowness, it dropped something in front of him. A carcass still steaming, its alien stag-like form twisted in death. Fresh blood steamed in the morning chill. Rin stayed still, every instinct screaming not to make sudden moves. The beast's gaze held him like a vice. Then, almost imperceptibly, it angled its head toward the kill. An offering. He didn't thank it. He didn't move toward it either. He just let the moment hang until the predator turned its attention back to scanning the horizon, ears twitching in minute adjustments to the wind. Hours later, as he worked on sealing the shuttle's ruptured fuel line, the predator was still there, never straying far. It moved with a strange patience, pacing in wide arcs, watching both him and the wasteland beyond. When he dropped a tool, the beast's head snapped toward the sound, pupils contracting to slits before it eased back. It was too deliberate, too measured to be mere instinct. That evening, Rin sat by the dim glow of the heat lamp, the scavenged stag's meat cooking on a portable heater. The scent of seared flesh drifted into the air, and the predator's nostrils flared. He cut a piece and, after a moment's hesitation, set it on a flat scrap of plating and pushed it toward the beast. It didn't pounce. It padded forward, massive paws soundless on the sand, and lowered its head to take the meat with almost delicate precision. The rumble that followed wasn't a growl. Not quite. It was something lower, more resonant, like the deep purr of an engine at idle. "You're not what they say you are," Rin muttered, mostly to himself. The next day the horizon rippled with motion, something fast, airborne. Rin squinted against the glare and saw a hunting drone, angular and black, its thrusters whining as it swept low. It was scanning. Searching. Before Rin could move for cover, the predator was gone in a blur of muscle and dust. The drone tilted midair to track it, weapons ports opening. There was a flash, a crack, and then the machine spun violently, sheared clean in half. The predator landed with feline grace, tossing the broken chassis aside like discarded prey. Rin stared. That had been no wild charge. It had waited until the drone committed to a firing vector, then struck from its blind spot. Cold, precise strategy. When he powered up the shuttle's short-range comm that night, a garbled broadcast cut through. Syndicate colors flashed in the corner of the feed, followed by the voice of a man Rin knew by reputation. Varen, a slaver king with fleets at his command. His words were slick, calculated. "To the crew who failed to bring me my prize, your debt grows. The beast is mine, to be broken in the pit and paraded before the galaxy. The human who meddles, kill him." Slowly. The message looped once before the signal died. Rin sat back, jaw tight. So the predator had been hunted, not for extermination but for spectacle. And now, by cutting it free, he'd painted a target on both of them. That night, the wind shifted again, carrying with it a scent Rin couldn't place, until the low crack of a rifle broke the silence. The round hit the hull above his head, sparking. He dove for cover. The predator's roar split the night. Shadows moved beyond the lamp's circle, figures in syndicate armor. Rin raised his rifle and fired into the dark, dropping one then another, but there were too many. Then the air filled with motion. The predator hit them like a meteor, claws and teeth flashing in arcs of wet red. When it was over, the camp was littered with bodies. The predator returned to the edge of the firelight, breathing hard, blood slick on its muzzle, not all of it its own. It sank onto its haunches, eyes on Rin. He didn't know what compelled him, but he reached into his pack, pulled out a ration bar and tossed it toward the beast. It caught the offering in midair without breaking eye contact. "I'm not letting them take you," Rin said quietly. For the first time, the predator closed its eyes in his presence, just for a heartbeat, as though acknowledging a pact neither of them had spoken aloud. The syndicate came at dawn, not with the chaos of raiders but the precision of a military strike. Hover skiffs cut low through the dust, their drives muted, flanking the camp in a slow tightening arc. The hum of their engines merged with the sigh of the wind, almost gentle until the first shock net fired and hissed through the air. Rin dropped flat, rolling behind the broken wing strut of the shuttle as the net slammed into the sand, sizzling with crackling energy. Kareth was already moving, a dark blur smashing into the nearest skiff with enough force to crush its stabilizers. The craft spun out, scraping the ground before detonating in a burst of dust and fire. Shouts in syndicate code cut through the haze, followed by the stutter of mag-accelerator rifles. The air around Rin sang with supersonic rounds. He returned fire, targeting the skiff gunners, knowing he couldn't drop them all. The Predator moved like a living storm. It didn't charge blindly, it struck from cover, weaving between rock outcroppings, using the shifting dust to vanish and reappear with lethal precision. Rin kept its flanks clear, picking off the soldiers who tried to flank it. For a moment, they fought as though they'd trained together for years, not shared barely 2 days in the wastes. A flare arced into the air, bursting into bright white fire. The skiffs scattered and regrouped, drawing back toward the east. Rin ducked behind the shuttle, catching his breath, but Kareth's gaze followed the retreat, muscles taut. "They're not done," Rin muttered. He didn't need the beast to understand the words. The truth was written in the way it shifted its weight, nostrils flaring toward the canyons beyond. They didn't have the luxury of holding position. With the shuttle crippled and the syndicate tracking them, they had only one real option: move. The canyons were a maze of sandstone and shattered glass ridges, carved over centuries by wind and acid rain. Shadows pooled in their depths even at midday. The Predator led, slipping through narrow defile with impossible grace for its size, pausing to listen before each turn. Rin followed at a steady jog, rifle ready, the echo of boots and claws bouncing off the walls in strange syncopation. The first pursuit force came within the hour. 2 skiffs, smaller than before, trying to run them into a dead end. Kareth vanished into a side cut, and Rin understood without words: bait. He took position on a ledge above the main path. When the skiffs entered the choke point, Kareth erupted from a side fissure, claws shearing through the lead vehicle's driver. The second skiff tried to reverse, but Rin's rifle rounds punched through its thrusters, dropping it in a spray of sparks. The survivors scrambled out, firing wildly, and the Predator was among them before they could regroup. When the dust settled, Rin dropped from his perch, scanning the wreckage for anything useful. That was when he found the smuggler. Pinned under a half-collapsed crate, the man was bleeding from a deep gash along his thigh. He raised empty hands when Rin's rifle came up. "Don't shoot, wasn't here for you. I've got information. About Varen." Rin hesitated. The syndicate leader's name was a shadow across every black market deal in this sector. Information could mean survival, or a trap. The smuggler coughed, blood flecking his lips. "They've got a tracker array in the canyon spire. Keeps a lock on your heat signature anywhere within 50 clicks. You kill it, you disappear. You don't, they'll hunt you to the bones." Kareth padded closer, towering over the man. He froze, eyes wide, breath shallow. The Predator leaned down, nostrils flaring, then turned and looked at Rin. The message was clear. They couldn't run while the array was active. And they wouldn't get another chance to strike before reinforcements closed in. As the smuggler dragged himself into the shadows, Rin and Kareth moved on. When they stopped to rest, the Predator dragged a claw through the dust, sketching a crude outline of the spire with a cross mark where the array sat. Rin stared at it for a long moment. "You're smarter than most people I've worked with," he said. The approach to the spire was a climb through jagged ravines where every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of boots on gravel echoing like rifle fire. Above them, the array towered, 3 antennae bristling from a skeletal frame, humming with power. They went in at night. The syndicate guards had ringed the base with motion sensors, but Kareth slinked between them like a shadow, movements measured and deliberate. Rin followed in its wake, disabling what he could without triggering alarms. The first guard never saw the Predator coming. The second had just enough time to scream before vanishing into the dark. Rin kept to the perimeter, placing charges on the support struts. When the last was set, he gave a low whistle. Kareth emerged from the shadows, blood dripping from its claws, and together they withdrew to the ridge line. The explosion ripped the night open, shattering the spire in a bloom of fire and molten debris. The shockwave rolled through the canyons, scattering flocks of winged scavengers into the sky. From their vantage, Rin could see the syndicate's tracking consoles go dead, the once constant hum of surveillance replaced by sudden, empty silence. Kareth made a sound then, a low, resonant chuff, deep in its chest. It wasn't the growl of warning or the roar of attack. It was almost pleased. Rin found himself grinning despite the danger. Yeah, he said. That'll make them think twice. But even as the spire's wreckage burned, he knew Varen wouldn't retreat. Men like him didn't let their prey slip away. The next move would be his, and it would come hard. Far to the east, lights flickered on the horizon. A larger force was coming. And this time the leader would be with them. The horizon burned with the glow of incoming engines. Dust plumes rose like storm fronts, the air thrumming with the approach of something heavier than skiffs. Rin crouched beside a ridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The syndicate convoy rolled hard, armored transports, escort bikes, and at the center a command crawler bristling with cannon mounts. On its prow stood Varen himself, a towering figure in polished obsidian armor, coat flaring in the wind. He wasn't here to send a message. He was here to finish it himself. Kareth crouched beside Rin, head low, muscles coiled. Its golden eyes locked on the command crawler, unblinking. The wound along its flank had scabbed into a dark ridge, but the way it shifted its weight told Rin it was still hurting. That didn't seem to matter to it. The convoy slowed as it neared the ruins of an ancient fortress that jutted from the canyon floor like the bones of some long-dead giant. Varen's men spilled out, moving with military discipline, sweeping the arches and shattered walls. The place would give them cover and high ground, and once they locked it down, there'd be no flushing them out without taking catastrophic losses. Rin checked his ammo count. Too low. Always too low. We hit them before they dig in, he said. Kareth's ears twitched at his tone, and that was all the answer he needed. They moved with the storm at their backs. Wind clawed at the canyon walls, carrying dust in sheets that turned the ruins into a shifting maze of shadow and grit. Rin climbed the outer wall while Kareth slipped through a breach below, their paths diverging, each taking a flank. The first guard didn't even see him. A suppressed shot dropped him into the dust, and Rin was already moving, clearing the battlements with quick, precise bursts. Below, Kareth tore through a squad that had been setting up a heavy repeater, its claws shearing through steel plating as easily as flesh. Then Varen stepped into the open, shotgun in one hand, sword in the other, his voice carrying over the wind. I've heard stories, he called. The untamable beast. The human it follows. I wanted to see for myself. Rin fired, but Varen was fast, dropping behind cover and returning a blast that shattered stone inches from Rin's head. The syndicate soldiers surged forward, pinning Rin down with suppressive fire. He dropped behind a crumbling wall, outgunned and boxed in. Kareth exploded into their ranks from the side, scattering men like leaves in a gale. Its roar shook the air, and for a heartbeat the syndicate line faltered. Then Varen was there, moving with brutal precision, the blade in his hand carving a deep slash across Kareth's shoulder. The predator staggered but didn't fall, snapping its jaws inches from the warlord's face. Rin vaulted down from the wall, hitting the ground hard and rolling to his feet. He closed the distance, firing into the soldiers trying to encircle Kareth. Every shot was a race against Varen's blade, the predator weaving and striking, each movement slower now, blood darkening its hide. Varen feinted, then drove the sword deep into Kareth's side. The predator's roar turned into a ragged snarl, legs buckling. Rin didn't think. He dove in, ramming his shoulder into Varen with enough force to knock the blade free. They hit the ground, the shotgun skittering away. Varen was strong. Too strong. He slammed Rin back against the stone, fists driving into his ribs. Pain burst white in Rin's vision, but he locked his hands around the warlord's wrist, forcing the blade aside as it sought his throat. A shadow fell over them both. Kareth lunged, jaws closing around Varen's weapon arm with a sickening crack. The warlord screamed, the sound raw and furious, and Kareth flung him across the courtyard like he weighed nothing. Rin staggered up, lungs burning, and put 3 rounds into Varen before he could rise. The warlord collapsed, armor scraping against the dust. The battlefield stilled. The few syndicate soldiers who remained hesitated, then backed away, their weapons lowering. Kareth stood over Rin, sides heaving, blood dripping from its flank in dark rivulets. Its golden eyes fixed on him, unblinking. Then, with slow, deliberate movement, it lowered itself until its massive head touched the ground at his feet. It was no act of submission to a master. It was something older. A warrior's recognition. The galaxy's deadliest predator, bowing to the human who had saved it, not once but twice. The soldiers saw it. The smuggler, peering from the shadows, saw it. The image burned into their minds, a living myth reshaped in a single breath. Rin rested a hand against the predator's armored hide, feeling the heat and tremor of its exhausted muscles. "We're not done," he said softly. "Not yet." They left the fortress in the Syndicate's own transport, the wind whipping through the open deck. Behind them, the canyon burned with the wreckage of the battle. Ahead lay uncharted space and whatever came next. Kareth curled in the cargo bay, one golden eye watching the dark horizon. For the first time since Rin had met it, that eye closed fully, the Predator's breathing evening out into true sleep. Rin sat beside it, rifle across his lap, gaze fixed forward. Somewhere out there, others would come. Varen's death wouldn't end the hunt, it would only change its shape. But for now, in the narrow quiet between storms, they had won. And in the ruins they'd left behind, the legend had already begun to spread. The battlefield smelled of scorched earth and blood, a thick haze clinging to the jagged rocks like the last breath of a dying world. The stars above were cold and unblinking, as if they were witnesses too distant to intervene. Kale stood at the ridge, rifle hanging loosely in his grip, his other hand resting on the thick fur of the Predator beside him. The creature's silver mane rippled in the wind, its yellow eyes tracking the movement of enemy silhouettes far below. The comm crackled in his ear. "They're regrouping for one last push. You've got minutes, maybe less, before they hit your position." The voice was raw, strained. It was Captain Viral, the only friendly voice left on this channel. Kale glanced at the Predator. It didn't look at him, but he could feel the shared thought. No fear, no doubt. The bond they'd forged in blood and survival was now something deeper than words, older than the stars themselves. "Tell command to stand by," Kale said. His voice was low, steady. "We end it here." Down in the valley, the alien war host was reforming. Towering armor beasts lumbered forward, flanked by ranks of shock troops with energy lances sparking in the night. The air shimmered with the heat of their weapon cores. Somewhere in that mass was the warlord responsible for burning half the border colonies to ash, the one who had placed a bounty on Kale's head after the Predator had chosen him. The Predator shifted, muscles coiling like compressed steel. Kale ran his hand down its neck, feeling the tension there. He thought back to that first moment in the ravine, when he dragged the beast from a hunter's trap instead of finishing it off. It had been a stupid decision then, a reckless act with no tactical gain. But in that moment he hadn't seen a monster. He'd seen something alone and cornered like himself. Now that act stood between the galaxy and annihilation. The ground shook. Enemy drums pounded through the valley, a rhythm meant to unnerve, to drown out thought. Kale stepped forward, the Predator pacing beside him. His breath misted in the cold air as his fingers tightened on the rifle grip. He didn't expect to survive this, he wasn't even sure he wanted to. But he would make damn sure the warlord didn't either. Energy bolts began to streak upward toward the ridge. Kale dropped into a crouch, returning fire with precise, surgical shots. Each pull of the trigger was deliberate, each burst cutting down an enemy before they could advance too far. The Predator stayed at his flank, letting out low, guttural growls that made the incoming troops hesitate just long enough for Kale's bullets to find them. Then the signal came, a sharp, piercing howl from deep within the Predator's throat. It reverberated across the valley, so loud and primal it froze the enemy in place. For a heartbeat, the entire battlefield went still. Then the shadows moved. From the treeline on both flanks, more Predators emerged, sleek, deadly shapes slipping through the smoke. Their eyes burned gold, their fangs gleamed in the starlight, and their movements were perfect mirrors of Kale's companion. The warlord had underestimated the truth. Kale had not tamed the galaxy's deadliest predator. He had befriended one, and in doing so earned the loyalty of the entire pack. The valley erupted into chaos. The Predators hit the enemy lines like a living storm, claws tearing through armor, teeth sinking into unprotected joints. Energy lances fired wildly, but the beasts were too fast, too relentless. Kale charged down the slope with his own Predator, rifle spitting fire, cutting a path toward the center of the fray. The warlord appeared ahead, towering, wrapped in black armor etched with the marks of 100 conquests. His weapon was a massive glaive, its blade humming with destructive energy. Even through the noise, Kale could hear the warlord's voice, a challenge heavy with contempt. Kale didn't answer with words. He just kept moving. The warlord swung, the glaive slicing through the air in a killing arc. Kale dropped, rolled under it and fired point-blank into the warlord's side. The armor held, but the impact staggered him. The Predator lunged, teeth snapping toward the warlord's throat, forcing him back. Sparks flew as the glaive met claw, the sound like grinding steel. They fought in a blur of movement, Kale and the Predator moving as one, every attack flowing into the next. The warlord was powerful, but he was fighting two enemies who thought like one mind. Kale's breath came in ragged bursts, his muscles screaming, but he refused to yield. A lucky strike from the warlord knocked Kale sprawling, his rifle skidding across the ground. The predator roared and leapt between them, taking the glaive strike across its shoulder. Blood sprayed, dark and hot against the cold air. Kale's vision narrowed. He grabbed a jagged shard of broken armor from the ground and charged, driving it deep into the joint of the warlord's leg. The alien roared, collapsing to one knee. The predator pounced, its massive jaws closing around the warlord's neck, crushing through the armor with a sickening crack. The warlord's body fell limp. The battlefield froze again, not from fear this time but from the sudden absence of their leader. The enemy ranks wavered, faltered, then broke entirely as the surviving troops fled into the darkness. Kale stood over the warlord's corpse, chest heaving. The predator limped to his side, blood still seeping from its wound. He placed a hand on its head, meeting its gaze. "We're not done yet," he murmured. "Not until they know never to come back." Above, the clouds broke just enough for a pale beam of starlight to fall across them. Around them, the other predators gathered, their golden eyes fixed on Kale. One by one they lowered their heads, not in submission but in acknowledgement. The calm crackled again. "Kill? Reports are coming in. The enemy's retreating on all fronts. Whatever you did," Viral's voice caught. "You ended it." Kale looked out over the valley at the ruins of the war machines, at the bodies cooling in the night air. "No," he said quietly. "We ended it." He knew this wouldn't be the last fight. Somewhere out there, other warlords would rise, other armies would threaten the fragile borders of human space. But now there was a new truth etched into the galaxy's memory: the deadliest predator bowed to no one, except the human who had saved it. And as long as they stood together, there was no force in the stars that could break them. Far in the distance, a new sound carried through the night, the low unified howl of the predator pack. It rolled over the hills like a promise, one the galaxy would not soon forget. The wreckage of the orbital station still burned in the distance, a skeletal silhouette against the pale light of the nearby sun. Kale stood on the fractured cliffside, one hand gripping the injured apex predator's shoulder. Vare loomed beside him, 12 feet of coiled muscle, talons and plated hide. The beast's breathing was shallow but steady, eyes locked on the horizon where the last dropships of the Jatari fleet were retreating. Their war cry had once been enough to shake entire sectors. Now the galaxy's deadliest predator stood bloodied yet unbroken, and beside it, the human who had changed everything. They hadn't spoken for hours, not since the final skirmish ended in a deafening silence. The battlefield lay strewn with the remains of machines, alien warriors and broken stone. Smoke curled up in lazy spirals, carrying with it the smell of scorched earth. Somewhere deep in Kale's ribs, pain throbbed with each breath, but he ignored it. His mind was still replaying the moment when Vare had thrown itself between him and the enemy commander's energy lance. The sound of the strike hitting Vare's armor, the guttural snarl of pain, the way the beast had stood anyway, striking back until the enemy broke, it would be burned into Kale's memory until the day he died. "You should be resting," Kale murmured finally, his voice hoarse. Vare turned its head, the narrow golden eyes meeting his. There was no submission there never had been, but there was understanding. The predator's gaze softened, just slightly, and it lowered itself to one knee in the gravel. It was not a bow of defeat. It was a warrior's acknowledgement. The sound of footsteps broke the stillness. Captain Jorin approached from the edge of the ridge, his armor battered and smoke-stained, his face lined with exhaustion. "Command's hailing us. They want to know if the beast is still under control." His tone was measured, but there was something sharper beneath it. Fear perhaps. Or awe. Kale didn't look away from Vare. "Tell them it's not under control. It's under alliance." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jorin's brow furrowed. "That's going to make them nervous." "Good." Kale's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "They should be nervous." From the skies above, the faint glow of incoming ships began to flicker through the clouds. Not enemy dropships this time, these were coalition carriers, their vast hulls blotting out the sun. As they descended, a ripple passed through the survivors scattered across the field. The war wasn't over, politics would follow, and politics could be bloodier than any battle. Vare's claws dug into the ground, the deep rumble in its chest vibrating the air between them. It could sense the shift, the new kind of fight that was coming. Kale rested a hand on the armored ridge along its neck, feeling the pulse of its strength. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we face it the same way we faced them. Side by side." The first carrier touched down with a roar of thrusters, sending a storm of dust across the ridge. Figures emerged in clean and scathed uniforms, their eyes darting between Kale and the towering beast beside him. Some looked at Vare with open fear, others with calculation as though already thinking of how to use it as a weapon. Kale felt his jaw tighten. They didn't understand. Vare wasn't a weapon. It was a person, a predator, yes, but one with its own will, its own code. A tall figure in an officer's cloak stepped forward. Captain Kale Wren. You've done the impossible. The predator lives, the enemy flees, and the council will want answers. His gaze flickered to Vare. But you know as well as I do, they'll want ownership. Kale stepped forward until he was almost nose to nose with the man. Ownership isn't on the table. That's not your decision to make. It is, Kale said evenly, if you want me to keep fighting for you. Behind him, Vare rose to its full height, casting a long shadow that swallowed the officer entirely. The beast's eyes glowed faintly in the fading light, its teeth bared in a silent warning. The officer took a half-step back before catching himself. He was smart enough not to push further, for now. The air grew heavier as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The survivors began to board the carriers, but Kale and Vare remained where they were, neither willing to turn their back first. The bond between them was no accident. It had been forged in fire, sealed with blood, and tempered in battles that neither the Council nor the Coalition could comprehend. If they tried to separate them, it wouldn't end with a meeting in some polished chamber. It would end with another war. Kale glanced up at Vare, and the beast dipped its head, just enough to be seen as an unspoken promise. Whatever they faced next, betrayal, political machinations, another army, it wouldn't matter. The galaxy's deadliest predator bowed to no one. But for Kale, it would stand at his side until the stars burned out. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the carrier's engines, the murmurs of soldiers, and somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of the enemy's retreat. Kale took one last look at the battlefield, then stepped toward the waiting ship. Vare followed, its massive frame moving with lethal grace, every step a reminder to those watching that this alliance was not one of leash and master, but of equals. And as the hatch closed behind them, sealing them away from the stares and whispers, Kale knew with a fierce certainty that the Real fight was only beginning.